We are live.
All right, let's just start.
Oh, yeah. We said prayer.
Yeah. Good.
All right. Well, my roommate's Catholic, so peace be with you. All right. I think like after doing the case study, I feel like we should be able to have a good discussion because we've all like gone over it 100 times, right?
Yeah.
So does anybody want to share what they think the key issues are in this case?
There's several different ones. I read through it several times. My husband read through it. One thing that him and I discussed together is that he didn't understand the numbers. He didn't understand where the numbers were coming from. And they weren't his numbers, so they didn't mean anything to him. And he was going at it one approach and not the approach that they wanted. And he was trying to best utilize his time to help with the company, and they didn't see it that way. And that's kind of where I kind of went at.
Yeah. Wasn't it like 3 months into his promotion that he started going a different direction than what they thought or something like that? Like it was a very short time.
Right.
Yeah, and then you know, it's like when he went on that business trip and they couldn't figure it out and he wasn't there and he went someplace else and he says, well, my time was more productive because I can do this and this and this versus sitting around forever waiting for this.
Yeah.
So he was trying to find the best usage of time. So I think their approaches came from two separate directions and they didn't know how to get onto the same path.
I think what his approach was, I guess I don't see a problem with it had he communicated with his boss, the manager, supervisor, what it was that he was doing, rather than just take off to another city and not be able to be in contact. Because like I think he mentioned something about he tried to look at his meeting schedule or something and he didn't respond.
Something like that,
Yeah. Communication. I feel like all of our answers this semester are going to start with bad communication.
Bad communication.
But
we needed this class. We needed this for our communications class.
Hey, exactly. Well, and then another thing I think of that was kind of, I'm going to say fishy or interesting on a problem that came is, in my opinion, Shannon McDonald and Thomas Green, they went to college together, if I remember right, or graduated at the same time. And so they shared a similar background. And so it almost seemed like McDonald used that friendship or that connection in the promotion, although he lacked the managerial experience, which is fine, but they weren't willing to train him on that. They just kind of threw him in and said, oh yeah, you know how to do this. And then he took his own course and it just blew back.
This is something that I'm dealing with right now in my job is we hired 2 new girls and they've been with us about 2 weeks now. And there was one day I was talking to a girl and I was explaining to her about how we do something, kind of here's kind of the format for it. And she just kind of avoided doing it. And I was like, all right, kind of keep an eye on that. Well, I mentioned it to my boss and said, okay, she's not really doing this, even though we talked about, why we do it. So we kind of pulled her aside and they had a conversation and she just flat out was like, yeah, I don't do that. I don't do that. I was like, all right, I think it's probably time to sit down and set your expectations for what they will be doing so that you're on the same page. Because there was a complete misunderstanding of what she thought she could do within her role and what we're actually having her do. And so now I'm the one that's supposed to be working with her, training her. They're not on the same page. She's like, okay, well, you let me know if we need to do that. I'm like, that's what I keep saying. You need to sit down with her. That's an expectation on both sides.
And they never will. and that's the thing, is there's expectations, but even in places I've worked recently, that same thing, they're not willing to go themselves to do it because they think that it's handled at our level, when it's not. It really can't be. I mean, certain things can, but unless the on-job training with management, with that experience, there's no way to justify it otherwise. It just becomes harder.
It does.
And that's where Frank Davis got, I think that's why he got kind of ticked off, is like, well, I've got the experience, put me in there, let me train him, and then you throw him into it, type of thing. But
yeah,
I think we have good intentions of training, but once they get all this other stuff done, so it gets shoved off to the side. It's like, I told you, I'm on a business trip, and they decided, it's for the company I work with back in Mississippi, and they decided, well, the office manager's leaving, we got to get all this stuff up. Linda, can you come back for a week, do intensive training so you can go back to Virginia and get everything into our new accounting system? I'm like, okay, because the office manager's leaving next week. Well, while I'm there, they decided to hire a new girl for me to train them in this new program that I'm still learning myself. And within an hour, they says, now does she know how to do everything? And I go, no. And she goes, this is so overwhelming. There's so much being thrown at me. I don't know which direction to go. And I go, I'm still learning all the ins and outs of this new program, to go back to do it all, to go back out in 2 to 3 weeks to start training everybody. And I got to go back and learn it and get their whole system up and going. So where's the training? You got to have training. You got to have communications. You have to know what their expectations are.
Absolutely. All right. So with that, you touched a little bit on it. So if you were Shannon McDonald, would you have hired Thomas Green, and why or why not?
Would I have hired him? Yes. Would I have promoted him that quickly? Probably not. At least not with and it's not even the experience. I think it's more of the understanding of how to do the job. Like with my father, we own a restaurant. You always want to employ people you know, because you know their work ethic, you know what they're going to do. But I think in this case, he didn't have the greatest work ethic to start, and so that's something they could have built on, and something that later on he could have worked up in the company, like what he wanted to do right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So describe what you think about Frank Davis.
He has every right to be pissed off.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it's hard to work with somebody when you didn't get a say in the hiring process, and they just kind of are doing their own thing. Even after, I think they had one conversation where Frank kind of told him, like, hey, here's what we expect, and you need to communicate better. And then Green still didn't follow through with it. So yeah, I think Frank had every right to be mad.
Yeah. He's like, you gave it to a friend versus somebody who knows the stuff. So yeah.
And I've seen that so many times. There's a company up here in Rexburg called Pizza Pie Cafe. It's also really common in Utah. And I worked for that. I gave him almost 4 years of my life. And, the first day he's like, yeah, I'd love to have you in management. I was like, oh, I've got 3 years experience prior. But it was like, I understand I have to work from the bottom up. And after 3.5 years, I finally realized, you know what? They're never going to make me manager. And after I left, I took a step back when I left for a new job, and I realized they employed their siblings as the managers.
Ew.
I was like, I understand why you would do that, but at the same time, it doesn't look good on the company later on.
Yeah.
And so I think Frank had every right to be pissed. He was there, he was trained, he was ready, and he was overlooked.
Yeah. So what value do you think Frank Davis has to the company?
I think he has a lot of value in that. He has a lot of potential, but they're not seeing it right.
Yeah.
All right. So on the other side of the coin, kind of describe what you think about Thomas Green.
Sorry, guys. I was on my phone and my phone died, so I just got back on.
Hello.
I think he has potential. He just needs to understand which direction they want to go. And I don't think they've spent the time and given the time of what direction, because he's shown that he can do it. He just needs to know which direction they want to go with it.
Right.
So just sitting with Shannon or McDonald or whatever her name is, I can't remember at this point, almost sitting there and, maybe hashing out, hey, this is where you could improve. This is what you're doing great. Kind of having an evaluation. And I think even at the beginning, having a weekly or, every other week evaluation. And then as he progresses, then you're less worried. You can step back, do an eval at more or less frequent times.
Right.
Yes.
So how do the actions of Thomas Green differ from the expectations of Frank Davis? And I feel like we've talked about this a little bit.
You say that question one more time, Danica?
Yeah, how do the actions of Thomas Green differ from the expectations of Frank Davis?
Okay.
So I think I don't know if you guys already discussed this or not, but one thing that I saw, or I guess that Davis emailed McDonald about, was, I guess, his attitude about the forecast. So Davis was complaining that Green wasn't very on board with the forecast, and that he needs to be more excited and more positive about the forecast, because if he tried hard enough, that they were attainable goals. And so I think that was one of the expectations that he was lacking, that the excitement, enthusiasm, that I guess partially why he got the promotion, that he kind of quit once he got it, and that excitement and I guess hard work kind of stopped.
Yeah.
I also think that just that lack of communication, I think had they, I think somebody mentioned just having like a weekly meeting, and it doesn't even need to be like a meeting, like even just a touch point, like 10-minute, okay, here's what I did last week, here's what I'm planning on doing this week, did you follow up with these items? I mean, I do that with my boss almost on a daily basis, because I work for a doctor, and half the time, like, if I don't chase him down, things will not get done.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, sometimes even those 5 minutes, just run through what's going on, some seem more effective too than the long term or a longer hour meeting or evaluation, just because I feel like you're not going to sit there and try and, sugarcoat or fluff something up.
Right.
Yeah. Well, see, when
But
I
think,
was secretary to
sorry,
one of
go
the
ahead.
when I was secretary to one of the owners of the business, we would sit down every Monday and map everything else. And in 10 minutes we were done.
Yeah.
And then he'll be sending me text messages, and I always knew when he's on a job because I got text messages. We get in the morning, it says, "This is everything you sent me. What do you need me to do?" 5 minutes later, we're done and we're on our way.
Yeah.
That way we both know what's going on. It's a simple ... check bases, go back, then you're on your way again. And I think that's what needed to happen here. They needed to just have that little quick, okay, this is what you're doing. No, we need to go this way, go that way. They should have brought that in, within the first month versus 3 to 6 months down the road when that letter came, says basically we want to get rid of you.
So I like this question. Who do you think is most at fault for the state of the current situation?
Oh,
I'll go first. I feel like I might have a different, I guess, view than you. Well, hold on. Does my picture say that I'm Madison?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's my wife's computer, but this is Andrew. Anyway, so
AKA Madison.
yeah, sorry for that intimate engagement picture that she has. But so I think Green is really at fault for this situation. I feel like he had a goal to obtain that promotion, and McDonald kind of said it clear, like, okay, I'm going out on a limb and I'm going to take a shot in you, but you're going to have to step it up. What you're doing is great, but it needs to become better. You're taking on a new role. You need to learn. I'm here to put you under my wing. And Davis, he has a chip on his shoulder because he didn't choose you. And so you're going to have to work hard with him to get him to like you. And so I think he knew the expectations of taking this position, but I think he just kind of, oh, I'm a great sales rep or whatever, executive, and I just did so good and people should respect me already. But I don't think he really earned the respect that he's looking for. He kind of just assumed that it was going to be his, and I think he was always looking to point fingers at other people than pointing them at himself at, okay, there's a forecast, I need to achieve it, I need to update my calendar, I'm responsible for making charts. Like, he just pointed fingers like, oh, they're just out to get me. So I think really the blame should be on him for the situation that he's in.
That makes sense. I can't argue with that.
Yeah, I agree with that one.
Right? All right. So if you
That
were,
beats my argument. So
if you were Thomas Green, what would you do now? I mean, got this
I would
email.
sit down and cry. We bought a house and everything else, and I think I'd sit down and cry and have a nervous breakdown.
Right. So after your nervous breakdown, Linda, what are you going to do?
Didn't evaluate myself of what I could do better and what can I do to salvage this job, and go and say this, have them go in and voice, this is where I was coming from. What do I need to be able to keep my job and to salvage it, and kind of be more the one to take the blame, but yet also say, help me to do better.
Yeah.
So I think he needs to put that forward.
Yeah. I think not only evaluating himself, but allowing others to evaluate him, not just his superiors, but even those he's over, and saying, hey, what do you feel I could do better? I know in evals, when I did them as a manager, when I was an employee and managers did them, the greatest question I think that was ever asked, or like the biggest insight, was, what do you think as a manager or as managers here at this establishment, what could we do better to help not only the employees but the customers? And it always came back to either working more with the employees or listening.
Mm-hmm.
Great things, but he wants to do them his own way and go a different route. And so I think if he were to take that insight or that thought, evaluate himself and realize, oh, I really shouldn't have done that, and then change, I think it would be, a better outcome in the end.
Yeah.
I think so. And I think everything boils down to is communication. I think in the process of life and everything, we all forget about communicating one with another. And I think that's the root cause of all of this, is communication.
Yeah.
I think that ties in with what I would do if I was in his situation. So I know there's been multiple talks about how pride is the root of a lot of evil, I guess. And I think at this point he needs to humble himself. Like I said before, that he just is pointing fingers. And I think he needs to realize that he's at fault and kind of push away his pride and then communicate with them saying, listen, I understand that I can do a lot better. So give me another shot. I'm willing to learn and listen and do better. And so I think along with communication, to really, I guess, humble himself and put aside his pride.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So kind of changing directions here, not so much about the case itself, but more about office situations. So in this case, how does power and office politics come into play?
I think what he was doing behind Davis's back wasn't very professional. I know that he would talk to people that aren't necessarily under Davis or a part of a different group. I know the case had different examples of him always complaining about Davis, how he's out to get him and how he doesn't like him and things like that. So I think, I guess, just talking behind backs and kind of trying to win people on your team against them. And I don't know. I feel like it wasn't very professional, and that if he has problems, that he needs to talk to Davis, not just complain and spread rumors and stuff to coworkers.
Do you think that Davis though had kind of an issue with him because he didn't get a say in his hiring and promotion?
I think so, but I think Davis also is the boss, and so, I mean, if I was the boss and someone, if McDonald did that, then yeah, I mean, I would be upset, for sure. And I think, yeah, partially there is, I'm sure, Davis was upset and maybe was treating Green harder or being a little bit rude, but I think that comes with the position, and that was kind of given. But yeah, Green or Davis, I think they're both to blame. I think Davis definitely could have done better too, but I don't know.
I think they can all do better, but it all boils down to, in a way, I think, because they were the friends, they did it and they didn't look at the whole picture.
Yeah.
So what are each of their conflict styles? I think for Green, it's definitely avoidance, because it seems like he did whatever he could to not be around when Davis was around.
Could we also call it neglect?
Probably. I mean,
yeah,
there's got to be some sort of relationship.
I mean, because he also neglected, any of those times or any of those ways that he could have. He just kind of, I don't want to say kept to himself, but didn't include or didn't try to reach out.
Feels as if he stayed out of the office and went into the office to be able to see what was going on as well.
All right, so how can he salvage the situation?
There needs to be a come to Jesus meeting.
Come to Jesus meeting.
I like humble yourself better.
You need to humble yourself and be able to see where you're going wrong, and that's basically what it is.
So does he include Shannon? Do they have her in on the meeting and have?
I think definitely. I think all of them together.
I think all three of them needs to be in there.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, there could be, between two of them, there could be something going on. Or, there could be something that one doesn't know about or something else that someone else sees.
Right.
So.
Then it's not he says, you said, it's more of them talking and everybody giving their own personal and come up with something from there. And that way you got somebody else in the meeting to see what's going on, so they're not coming out saying he and she and stuff like that.
Right. Any suggestions on how to repair the relationship with Davis? always awkward and uncomfortable after the come to Jesus meeting, right?
Yeah.
That's the truth. I don't know. I mean,
don't know how
talking would be a great way because, communicating, but at the same time, I don't know. That's a good question.
It's a tough one because it's not like all of a sudden they're going to start hanging out, right?
I mean, it's going to take time, I think. And it may never come back.
It all depends on how good of a relationship they have one with another and how much they want to keep it.
Yeah.
And do they let it come in their way in the workforce?
I think one thing, so I feel like Davis is pretty headstrong, or like, I'm in boss, I'm in charge. And so I think just his personality, if Green were to succumb to his leadership, saying, okay, you're the boss, kind of realizing I'm under you, you're in control, like just letting him know that he knows his position and willing to learn, like just have the attitude like, okay, I'm doing it wrong, teach me. Like you're obviously know so much better. You're the one I report to, so tell me what you want, and kind of let Davis know that he's willing to, I guess, fall in line and I guess try to do what's expected. And so I think with Davis, maybe seeing that, he'd be like, okay, he does want to learn. Maybe I have been hard on him. I'll restart with him and kind of lay out my expectations more. And so I think just Green going to him and saying, I'm sorry, I want to learn. I want to become better. I know I don't have this managerial experience yet. Teach me. You've been here. What have you done? And kind of just try to, I don't know, build that relationship from the bottom.
Okay. I know throughout our reading over the last couple of days, we've talked about managing up. So how can that be applied at work? For me, I guess the biggest thing is communication and letting like a supervisor or manager know, like, hey, I'm having a hard time with such and such. I could really use either some help, some ideas, something, instead of just not meeting the expectations, and letting the manager have the opportunity to actually do the like managing, but not so much as here's what you're supposed to do, go do it, but actually having a manager sit down and be like, okay, let's work through this together, because I think that helps build a relationship between employees.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I just joined. This is Anna. My apologies for coming in
Hi,
late.
Anna.
Hi. And Jake, thanks for the extra help.
Oh, no problem. Sorry, I thought it was confusing.
Yeah.
All right, so what are the
question one more time? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. So managing up. Yep, managing up. How can it be applied at work?
Managing up.
If you have a manager who's really, really busy and is not in the details, I think we can help manage it by just giving bullet points to the manager and saying, here's where you come in. This is what I need from you to do my job or complete these tasks. Can I get 10 minutes of your time? And I think that's what you kind of have to just get in front of the manager, tell them what you need from them, and then set time aside with them to complete those things. That's, yeah. suggestion.
Yeah.
Good suggestion.
I don't think so. Sometimes I don't think it's going to happen right away. It may take time as well. Like I just came, the job I just lost a week ago, we haven't had a supervisor for over 6 months.
Wow.
And so it was hard. And so our boss or our department head, without that middleman, it became really hard. And so, I was kind of like the unofficial assistant type of thing. But even then, it was still hard because you don't have the authority to help anything. And all you can do is just keep relaying, hey, this is going on. You need to be aware. And so I think not everything's solved at once. And that's, I think, something that they were hoping would happen right away. But I think it's going to take time.
Yeah.
So what are the principles of power within an organizational structure?
Say that one more time. What was the big first part of it?
Yep. What are the principles of power within an organizational structure?
Well, I think seniority is a pretty big principle, especially when there's different tiers of leadership. And so I think that needs to be an applied principle. Just so, like for this example, Davis doesn't feel like his toes are being stepped on. Like he was supposed to be able to promote, or I guess offer names for that promotion. But I think McDonald kind of came in and buddied with Thomas because they're both from Georgia. And so I think that seniority needs to be respected, and that you need to, I guess, acknowledge it and accept it.
And even, I like that, but even when seniority is not a factor or respected, I think being able to respect and understand the decision of why. In this case, it was, it was buddy to buddy. It's kind of hard to respect that. But I mean, there's a lot of times companies will bring managers from another area or even outside of the business, outside of the company. And I think in ways that's understandable, but you have to be able to respect them. And I think that first initial contact, I think if Thomas Green had said, hey, I understand that this happened, and it wasn't a buddy thing, but to say, I understand that you're going to be angry at me, but what I'd like to do is work together. I'd love to hear your ideas so that we can use them together in order to make everything go. So I think building that trust along with that is a huge factor.
Uh-huh.
So how do office politics come into play in organizations?
I hate politics.
What was that? Oh, politics. Politics always play in an organization. I don't care where you're at, what job you have, there's always politics.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're never going to get around it. And I don't think, you can hash that to death and not be able to come up with a good solution because it's there.
Right. So how can you be proactive in managing office politics, conflict, power?
I think you can get ahead of it before it happens. I mean, the thing with Davis and Green easily could have been, they knew it was going to happen or something. It could have easily been avoided by saying, hey, this is why we made this decision. We understand that you've been here longer, but maybe, just getting ahead before something negative starts taking place.
Mm-hmm.
I think McDonald did try to do that by talking with Green and saying, hey, you weren't going to be the first pick if Davis was involved with the hiring process. So I just want to warn you, and you really got to prove yourself. So I think she did try to do it, but then to your point, Green, he wasn't able to do like the simple things, and I'm sorry if this was already mentioned before, but I think he didn't understand like what the expectations were for him coming in, and following the culture and whatever powers were already established. He was just trying to do his own thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, can anybody make a gospel connection with this?
When you're in a leadership position, you're not the one that it's my way or no way. We're there to counsel, we're to work with one another and to shepherd and take care of one another. And you don't leave anybody behind. Because that's how the Savior is. The Savior's gone out and has looked for the one to bring them all and to keep them all strong. Same thing in the workforce. You got to keep them all strong. You got to love them, to nurture them regardless of what they're going through.
Mm-hmm. Right. I like that. I think that's a really good answer. So I think the thing that came up most frequently during this discussion was the lack of communication. As we've decided, this will be the theme for the semester, communication. Let me read to you the rest of the story as to what ended up happening. After McDonald's February 5th, 2008 email, Green took the offensive against his boss. He crafted a series of memorandums, emails, reports, and projections that exposed inaccuracies and creative forecasting. This data enabled Green to build some alliances with other marketing personnel who used the data to ultimately side with him. On April 4th, it was announced that Frank Davis was being moved laterally to an undefined special project. However, Green's tactics were seen as overly brutal by many in the company, and although he won the battle against his boss, his career was irreparably harmed. McDonald distanced herself from him, and by July of 2008, Green announced he was resigning from his position to pursue full-time studies for an MBA. Yeah, so nobody won.
Yeah,
Nobody
everyone
won
just
that
lost that. That is not a win-win.
Yeah,
No, it's
not
a win.
No, that's not a win-win at all.
Right.
Right? We
He
can
could've
only
just
speculate what would have occurred. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, he should have just left quietly and went for his MBA. And instead of burning bridges, and then maybe he could have come back. They would have seen it as him, gaining more experience or coming with a stronger skill set, and everybody would have been in a better situation.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Last little comment here says that we can only speculate what would have occurred if Green had tried to help Davis work out the discrepancies and problems with forecasts. Perhaps both would have succeeded.
Mm.
So when we communicate, we can all have a win-win, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
Anybody else have any last thoughts, comments on the situation? No, we're all good. Thanks for everybody showing up. Appreciate it. Small group, small in numbers, but that's okay.
Thank you guys for understanding.
It was still a good discussion. So